Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. We finally have some good news, at least I hope it's good news, with the Gaza ceasefire. I think it's far too early to tell whether or not this is good news. And, it's off to a rocky start. We'll be discussing that in a moment. But joining me on today's episode is Mustafa Fetouri. He is a Libyan academic, an award-winning journalist. He covers Middle East, North African affairs, geopolitics, and he's contributed to several, media outlets like that you probably all follow, such as Middle East Monitor, Al Monitor, and RT, and many others. So, Mr. Fetouri, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Pleased to be with you, Jackson. I have to also, make it clear that it's one of the podcasts I really follow constantly, and I also have to say that I enjoy much of the interviews you conduct, especially when it comes to the Middle East.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to start off by talking about the news of the day, which is this Gaza ceasefire plan. I think the most important point to note is that everyone is saying this is phase one of the ceasefire deal that has been signed. Last ceasefire back in January, late December, that ceasefire only made it through phase one, I believe, of the deal, or maybe phase two a little bit. So what do you make of phase one? This is about freeing all the hostages and then freeing Palestinian hostages back. But there's no guarantee of a permanent ceasefire in this phase one of the deal.
Well, unfortunately, there is no guarantee of anything. I mean, the 20 points initiative by President Trump doesn't really give guarantees to anybody except the Israeli side. And that's one thing. The other thing, specifically the ceasefire, there is no guarantee that Israel will not be breaking the ceasefire again and resuming bombardment of Gaza like it did, I believe, last March after the ceasefire phase one, as you described it, of the ceasefire was almost expired, and the Israelis suddenly decided to go into war again. So what I make of it is, while it's a good news, as you suggested in the beginning, I would also think it's quite risky position for the resistance movements inside Palestine, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, and its the different manifestations. Why is that? Because, first of all, the entire so-called Trump initiative is not grounded in any international legal framework like it should be, such as, for example, UN Resolution 242 or Resolution 338, which not only call for a ceasefire, but also make it decisively clear that the Israelis have to leave the occupied territories in both the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and that leads to the creation of the Palestinian state that supposedly to coexist alongside Israel along the 67 borders. That's one thing. The other thing is that really worries me. There are no guarantees whether for the long-term peace sought by Mr. Trump through this 20-point initiative, or through for the long-time peace in the region, let alone for the Palestinians. So there is no talk of any guarantees around that one. The third point that also worries me, there is no reference made in the initiative itself for example, to critical decisions, international legal decisions like the 2024, last year, I mean, the decision by the International Court of Justice that described the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories in both Gaza and the West Bank as illegal, and ordered Israel to remove its forces from both Palestinian territories, as well as dismantling the separation wall that has been built over the last decade or so to separate certain areas from what is called Israel without any definition of clear borders, actually, and took over much of the Palestinian land, especially in the the southern part of the West Bank. Yes, please.
Well, I share a lot of those same concerns. I'm not gonna lie. It's difficult though, because without any other neighboring countries stepping up and doing anything, really substantive for the Palestinians, you say, well, what other option? The lieutenant colonel, just one last thing, the lieutenant colonel Aguilar, that was part of the Gaza aid program that the U.S. and Israel was doing. It was no aid. It was a ethnic cleansing to remove them into certain locations, as we all know. But I mean, that plan, the continued aid supplying, would have guaranteed this Trump plan for the Gaza Riviera, as he called it. This plan is also enshrining the illegal actions of Israel as something that is, I guess, justifiable in the eyes of the international community now if they get away with this. So I don't know what to say. I think at this point, anything that stops the bombs might be the best thing.
Well, I agree. I mean, that's the whole overall idea. To both the Palestinians in Gaza, the leadership and the resistance movement inside Gaza, the West Bank, as well as the overwhelming idea, I believe, if you like, of the mediators, including the newcomers like Turkey. And while that is a good news, because we have seen what the Israeli brutalities can do and have been doing over the last 2 years plus 2 days, and the way the Israeli side chose to prosecute the war over the last 2 years is definitely genocidal in technique, genocidal in ideas, genocidal in long-term policy. And the ultimate goal remains to be removing as many Palestinians as possible, not only out of Gaza, but also out of the West Bank. We have to keep that in mind. And removing them either by killing them, mass murder, as we have seen, have been watching over the last 2 years, or encouraging them to leave the territory and their homes and businesses and everything else. But again, I think what the sacrifices the Palestinians have been making over the last years have been enormous, and they have scored a lot of points at this stage. And we always have to be on guard, not to believe what the Americans are doing or saying or promising, especially the current Trump administration. And we also have to remember some of the historical context. What the 20-point initiative presented or being accepted, partially at least, is actually reproduction, if you like, or reviving in a different way of the 1919 British mandate over Palestine. So it's more or less the same thing, in the sense that it's this time it's an American mandate without the United Nations. The 1919 mandate was approved by the United Nations, even a later date in some form or the other, grounded in some kind of moral, legal, quote unquote, guarantees for the people living in Palestine, as we have seen in the Balfour Declaration of 1917. This time, though, it's quite different. It doesn't guarantee anything, as we mentioned before. Furthermore, even the mandate, the American mandate, as I would call it, doesn't give any time span, if you like, and hardly mentions anything about, doesn't actually mention anything about a future Palestinian state, doesn't mention anything about Palestinian sovereignty, doesn't mention anything about the guarantees for the solution of the problem of the refugees. We have millions of Palestinians across the world, in the region and far away. It doesn't say anything about those people. It only concerns itself with the two main things. One, security, long-term security for the Israeli occupation as it is today, and some kind of, ending any future attempt, to try to resist the occupation, which is a legal right to people who are under occupation, according to UN Charter.
And just to reiterate how meaningless, I guess, this ceasefire deal is for the Israelis and how seriously they're taking it. I saw right before we went live, I was checking news updates, and Al Jazeera 14 minutes ago, 4 hours ago, and 6 hours ago, breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. This part of Gaza bombed by Israel. This part of Gaza bombed. It's still happening, even though the ceasefire is technically okay. It's supposed to be signed. It's supposed to be coming into effect, but they're still bombing. I want to ask you, I've got a few questions about what you just said, but Turkey, you said as a new mediator. I will admit that I've become a little bit jaded with these negotiations and following them so closely because so many of them are just BS on the Israeli-U.S. side. But was Qatar, was Egypt not as involved in these negotiations? Turkey was the primary actor here?
No, I wouldn't describe it like that. The Qataris and the Egyptians are still involved, and they are the main drivers, if you like, of the negotiations, as they have been so far since the beginning in October 2023. I think the role of Turkey is getting more important on the ideological basis. So the Americans are trying to use Turkey, given its moral weight, if you like, since Hamas, the main fighting group, the main resistance group inside Gaza, responsible for the Al-Aqsa flood, is an Islamist, and basically Islamist movement in terms of ideology. And Erdogan is Turkey, present-day Turkey, as it has been for the last decade or so, have been presenting itself as the prominent or number one leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, of which Hamas belongs, at least ideologically. And that's another topic differently. So I think whoever is certainly not Mr. Trump who thought of this. He's quite dumb to actually think of such a thing. And I think it's some clever guy in the national security somewhere, or one of these think tanks like the Heritage Foundation or something, who came up with the idea. So the role of Turkey is being used as a moral, if you like, enabler for the U.S. plan to go ahead. And I noticed also the Turkish side, probably Mr. Erdogan himself, after he met with President Trump at the side of the United Nations General Assembly last month. I think he said something to the effect that he got some guarantee from Trump that it will not only be the first phase of the ceasefire, exchange of the prisoners and all that, but he will also keep going and make sure that we end up at some kind of peace process like the 1991 Madrid peace process. I'm not, you know, I find it difficult to actually believe any of this. I find it also difficult to imagine how the current Israeli government, not only the current Israeli government, the entire Israeli society, can accept the basic idea of having a Palestinian state alongside their own. It's completely unthinkable inside Israel, and I don't know if you have been following the public opinion polls inside Israel. The other day I saw one about 2 months old or something that says 62% of the Israelis, the entire society, I mean, not just the right wing, die-hard supporters, but the entire Israeli society, 60 of them, do not find it genocidal what's happening in Gaza. They actually supported, and around the same number, I don't remember now, around the same percentage, they said there are no innocent people in Gaza and everybody is terrorists, including those who were born today and yesterday and last week. So you are talking about a society that went completely lunatic. And against this background, given the current state of the government in Israel, which is a gang of right-wing fanatics and racists, including the prime minister himself, I don't really see how Mr. Erdogan could, dare to say that he has some kind of guarantees from Trump. Trump himself cannot be trusted, and we have seen him in action where he cannot be trusted over and over again. So but again, the increasingly the Turkish role in mediation is becoming or will become more critical for the success of any future plan, be it to the creation of Palestinian state or maintaining the ceasefire said to be already finalized in Sharm el-Sheikh today.
Well, it sure sounds nice to be able to say that you have the guarantees from Trump, but I agree. I don't think there's anything that can be guaranteed. I mean, it would be really, really based if Erdogan said something like, look, if this ceasefire isn't actually implemented in the ways that you promised, we're pulling out of NATO. Just go full nuclear on him, something like that. Hey, obviously wouldn't do it, but it'd freak Trump out probably. But about the second phase of the ceasefire deal, it says, negotiations would be had about a permanent ceasefire. And then it also says, the disarmament of Hamas. So now these are the people who for the past several years have been saying, we are going to crush Hamas. We're going to destroy every last Hamas member. We're going to kill them all. And then just this week, they're having to sit in the same city as them and engage in negotiations with the people they attempted to kill in Qatar just a few weeks ago. The disarmament of Hamas, though, is that actually a possibility? Because, as I understand it, a lot of these weapons that Hamas has, they produce themselves. They are very skilled, craftsmen. And so you take the guns away or you take the rounds away, whatever it is. And it's like, well, can't they just make new ones? They have the institutional knowledge. I don't understand how you disarm a people as innovative as the Palestinians.
Well, first of all, it's completely unthinkable how you could wipe out, if you like, the Israeli term used in the beginning of the genocide in October 8, 2023. How could you wipe out Hamas, which is not really the organization that you would like to wipe out or possible to? It's basically an idea. Let's remember that, before 87, Hamas did not exist at all. It was not there. And it came into the scene, political scene, if you like, specifically in Gaza and later in the West Bank, as a charity organization. So the number of believers in the Hamas idea, forget about the arming and the arms and fighting, all this. Let's go with the basics, the number of people who believe in the noble causes promoted by Hamas and worked for by Hamas, the schools, the clinics, the rehabilitation of agricultural land, you name it, and getting the money for the people, donations, and so on and so forth, distribution of food and all that. Those people still believe in the same noble causes, and they are increasing by the day. And the other day, there was a report by the American intelligence, one of them, I think, last year, that says, I think it's the CIA itself, that says Hamas has been able to recruiting double the number of fighters it lost during the war in Gaza. Okay, having said that, we have to also consider the fact that Hamas and the others, we have to remember the others, alongside Hamas, inside Gaza specifically, might have suffered a lot, might have been crushed in terms of their military power and capabilities and organizations and command and control centers and all this kind of thing. But then you have to remember also, this is not an organized military organization or establishment like the Israeli colonial military, for example. It doesn't have military bases. It doesn't have long-term kind of military build-up in the classic manner. It doesn't own naval bases. It doesn't own any long-range rockets. It doesn't have any kind of civil air defenses. It doesn't own or operate any tanks or heavy armors. What it does, two things. What it does have is two things. One, the belief in the cause it's fighting for, and the other thing, the ability to adapt to different circumstances. And we have seen that. The other point that we also have to remember that make it unthinkable, actually, Hamas can be wiped out, or along with the others, Islamic Jihad and the Palestinian Liberation Front, and so on and so forth, is the fact that we have to remember those people have been under strict and suffocating Israeli and international siege since 2007. And look what happened. I mean, what they managed to do, despite the suffocating siege that controls everything. Everything is being checked that goes inside Gaza and comes out of it, including things like sewing needles. You really have to get the permission from the Israelis to get them inside, and so on and so forth. So the basic idea, or the big goal, if you like, of the Israeli genocide announced by criminal ICC sought fugitive Netanyahu back in 2023, the big main goal was to wipe out Hamas. And for the last 2 years, probably he has learned the lesson the hard way that there's no way to do so. And even if Hamas is crushed militarily and Gaza put back in the same conditions or under the same conditions that prevailed from 2007 until 2023, the same thing will happen again. Maybe it will take longer. What I mean by that, I mean that if Hamas is gone as an organization in terms of military capabilities, another Hamas under a different name is likely to appear, as long as the colonization is there, as the occupation is there, the siege is there, as long as there is no peace, regardless of what the neighboring countries think, regardless of what the United States believes or wants to see, regardless of what the Palestinian Authority itself in the West Bank like to see. So it's more of a fantasy, if you like. The people in Gaza, organizations as well, they have suffered a lot over the last 2 years and 2 days, and undoubtedly they have paid a heavy price, but that has always been part of the history of the resistance, not only in Palestine but also across the world. Look at the Vietnam experience, look at the Algerian experience, and you name it.
Yep. And Henry Kissinger once said that in guerrilla warfare, if the conventional army doesn't completely wipe out the guerrillas, then they lose. If the guerrillas can stay alive and their message lives on, their fight lives on, their people live on, they win. And as crazy as it is to think that after all this loss of life and bloodshed, someone could dub this as a tactical win for the resistance. You look at this as just an outside observer, you'd think never could that be the case, but in actuality, it is. That is the goal of a guerrilla resistance force, and that's what the resistance, not just Hamas, as you mentioned, many other groups, PFLP, DFLP, PIJ, some of those who aren't even sanctioned as terrorist organizations by the United States and by the United Kingdom, by the way. I mean, these are resistance groups that aren't even sanctioned, but that is what they have done. And I hope that they continue that resistance. And I hope that I know they will. So I think that's a good point to leave off on. Mustafa Fetouri, thank you so much for joining me today. Very enlightening discussion. I encourage everyone to follow you on Twitter. Is there anywhere else you'd like to shout out for people to stay up to date with your work?
Well, yes. As you mentioned in the introduction, I'm much more focused to Libya because it's very critical given the country's location, strategic location. And I also do a lot of work on Palestinian issues, including the current genocide. And I am very open to debates and, of course, criticism from different quarters here and there, including the fanatical supporters of the genocide itself. So I don't shut out anybody, and I welcome all points of views. And on final note, I have to thank you, Jackson, and I also have to confirm that I'm a big fan of yours, and I will always be there following whatever work you are doing, especially the one you mentioned about the start and the Sahel region. Maybe that will be very, very interesting, not just to me as focused person writing in the region, but also for everybody else who wants to change, who wants to understand the dramatic and swift changes that have been taking place in the Sahel region. So, and thank you again for having me, Jackson.
Thank you so much. And I'll say, anyone, I do not envy anyone who has to be, you mentioned you like the debates. I don't envy anyone who has to debate you about this genocide, because wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. Pleasure.